You've been told to lose weight, eat better, and exercise more, but nobody's actually told you whether you have insulin resistance in the first place. You're sitting there, wondering if your fatigue, your belly fat, your constant cravings are because of insulin resistance, or if it's something else entirely. And the worst part, your doctor runs a standard blood panel, your fasting glucose comes back normal, and they tell you everything's fine, but you know something's not right. I'm Dr. James Morrison, a nutritionist who helps people balance their blood sugar, improve their metabolic health, and understand their bodies on a deeper level. And today, I'm going to show you how to test for insulin resistance at home, without expensive lab work, without needles, and without waiting weeks for results. Now, if you watched my previous video on the stages of fasting, you already know how critical insulin sensitivity is for your metabolic health. But today, we're going deeper. We're going to give you practical, actionable ways to assess your own insulin sensitivity right now, in your own home, with tools you probably already have. Here's the biggest misconception about testing for insulin resistance that keeps people in the dark about their own health. Most people think you need expensive lab tests to know if you have insulin resistance. They think they need to go to a doctor, get blood drawn, wait for results, and have someone in a white coat interpret numbers for them. And because of that belief, they never actually assess their insulin sensitivity at all. They wait until something goes seriously wrong, until they're diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes before they take action. But here's the truth. Your body is constantly giving you signals about your insulin sensitivity. You just need to know how to read them. The reason this misconception is so damaging is that insulin resistance doesn't develop overnight. It's a slow, progressive condition that can take years or even decades to manifest as full-blown diabetes. But during all that time, your body is struggling. Your cells are becoming less responsive to insulin. Your pancreas is working overtime to produce more and more insulin to compensate. Your blood sugar is starting to creep up, even if it's still technically in the normal range. And all of this is causing damage to your blood vessels, your nerves, your organs, long before you get an official diagnosis. If you wait until your fasting glucose is elevated, you've already been insulin resistant for years, possibly a decade or more. By that point, you've missed the window where reversing the condition is easiest. This is why testing yourself, understanding the early warning signs, and catching insulin resistance in its early stages is so incredibly important. The earlier you catch it, the easier it is to reverse. And you don't need fancy equipment to do it. Now let's break down what insulin resistance actually is, so you understand what you're testing for. Insulin is a hormone produced by your pancreas, and its primary job is to help glucose, which is sugar, get from your bloodstream into your cells where it can be used for energy. Think of insulin like a key that unlocks the door to your cells. When you eat food, especially carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises. Your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin binds to receptors on your cells, which opens the door and allows glucose to enter. But when you have insulin resistance, those receptors stop responding properly to insulin. It's like the lock on the door has gotten rusty or damaged. The key doesn't work as well anymore. So your pancreas has to produce more and more insulin, turning the key harder and harder to get the same amount of glucose into your cells. This is why insulin resistance is often called a state of hyperinsulinemia, which means high insulin levels in the blood. Here's what people don't realize. You can have completely normal blood sugar and still be severely insulin resistant. How? Because your pancreas is compensating. It's producing massive amounts of insulin to keep your blood sugar in check. Your fasting glucose test comes back at 85, which looks perfect. but your insulin levels might be 3 or 4 times higher than they should be. And high insulin itself is incredibly damaging. It promotes fat storage, especially around your abdomen. It increases inflammation throughout your body. It raises your blood pressure. It contributes to hormonal imbalances. It increases your risk of heart disease, Alzheimer's, and cancer. This is why standard blood tests miss insulin resistance so often. They're only measuring blood sugar, not insulin. And by the time your blood sugar starts to rise significantly, you're already deep into insulin resistance. Your pancreas has been working overtime for years, and now it's starting to fail. It can't produce enough insulin anymore to compensate for the resistance. That's when your blood sugar finally goes up, and that's when you get diagnosed with prediabetes or diabetes. But the insulin resistance started long before that. So what are the early warning signs that your body is giving you? Let's go through the most common symptoms and signs of insulin resistance. And I want you to honestly assess how many of these apply to you. First, excess weight around your midsection. This is probably the most visible sign of insulin resistance. When insulin levels are chronically elevated, your body is in constant fat storage mode, and insulin preferentially stores fat around your organs and in your abdominal area. This is visceral fat, and it's the most metabolically dangerous type of fat. If you have a waist circumference greater than 40 inches for men or 35 inches for women, that's a strong indicator of insulin resistance. Second, constant hunger and cravings, especially for carbohydrates and sugar. When your cells are insulin resistant, they're not efficiently getting the glucose they need for energy, even though your blood is full of it. So your cells send out hunger signals. Your body thinks it needs more food, more energy, when really the problem is that the energy can't get into the cells. This creates a vicious cycle. You eat more carbs, your blood sugar spikes, your insulin spikes, your cells become more resistant, and the cycle continues. Third, fatigue, especially after meals. If you feel exhausted or sleepy after eating, particularly after a meal high in carbohydrates, that's a red flag. What's happening is your blood sugar is spiking dramatically. Your pancreas is dumping out a massive amount of insulin to deal with it, and then your blood sugar crashes. That crash leaves you feeling tired, foggy, and craving more sugar to bring your energy back up. It's a blood sugar roller coaster, and it's exhausting for your body. End of point. Fourth, brain fog and difficulty concentrating. Your brain is an incredibly energy-demanding organ, and it needs a steady supply of glucose to function properly. When your blood sugar is constantly spiking and crashing, your brain doesn't get that steady supply. You end up with periods of brain fog, difficulty focusing, poor memory, and mental fatigue. Many people with insulin resistance describe feeling like they're thinking through a haze. Fifth, skin changes. Insulin resistance can cause a condition called acanthosis nigricans, which shows up as dark, velvety patches of skin, usually in the folds and creases of your body, like your neck, armpits, or groin. This happens because high insulin levels stimulate skin cells to reproduce too quickly. If you notice these dark patches, it's a strong indicator that your insulin levels are elevated. Sixth, frequent urination and increased thirst. When your blood sugar starts to get high, your kidneys try to filter out the excess glucose by dumping it into your urine. This makes you urinate more frequently and can leave you feeling constantly thirsty. Now, this symptom usually shows up later in the progression of insulin resistance, when your blood sugar is already starting to rise, but it's still important to be aware of. Seventh, high blood pressure. Insulin resistance and high blood pressure often go hand in hand. Elevated insulin levels cause your kidneys to retain sodium and water, which increases blood volume and raises blood pressure. High insulin also stiffens your blood vessels and overactivates your sympathetic nervous system, both of which contribute to hypertension. If you have high blood pressure, especially if you're relatively young or not overweight, insulin resistance could be a contributing factor. Eighth, irregular menstrual cycles or symptoms of polycystic ovary syndrome in women. Insulin resistance is a major driver of PCOS, which is one of the most common hormonal disorders in women of reproductive age. High insulin levels disrupt the normal balance of reproductive hormones, leading to irregular periods, excess hair growth, acne, and difficulty getting pregnant. If you're a woman experiencing these symptoms, insulin resistance is very likely involved. Now, here's where we get into the actual at-home tests you can do to assess your insulin sensitivity. These aren't going to give you a precise medical diagnosis, but they will give you a very good indication of where you stand. And the beauty of these tests is that you can do them repeatedly over time to track your progress as you make changes to improve your insulin sensitivity. Test number 1 is the waist-to-height ratio. This is one of the simplest and most accurate predictors of metabolic health you can do at home. All you need is a tape measure. Measure your waist circumference at the narrowest point, which is usually just above your belly button. Then, measure your height. Divide your waist measurement by your height measurement using the same units for both. For optimal health, your waist should be less than half your height. So if you're 70 inches tall, your waist should be less than 35 inches. If your ratio is 0.5 or higher, that indicates you're carrying excess abdominal fat, which is strongly associated with insulin resistance. Why does this matter? Because visceral fat, the fat around your organs, is not just passive storage. It's metabolically active tissue that produces inflammatory compounds and hormones that worsen insulin resistance. The more visceral fat you have, the more insulin resistant you're likely to be. And your waist measurement is the best simple indicator of how much visceral fat you're carrying. This test takes 30 seconds and requires nothing but a tape measure. Yet it's more predictive of metabolic disease than your BMI or your weight on a scale. Test number 2 is the fasting blood glucose trend test. Now, I know I said you don't need blood tests, but hear me out. A single fasting glucose measurement doesn't tell you much, but tracking your fasting glucose over time, looking for trends and patterns, can be incredibly revealing. You can get a basic glucose meter at any pharmacy for $20 or $30. First thing in the morning, before you eat or drink anything except water, prick your finger and measure your blood glucose. Do this for at least 7 days in a row, ideally 14 or 30 days, and track the numbers. What you're looking for is not just whether the numbers are in the normal range, but how consistent they are, and whether they're trending upward over time. A truly insulin-sensitive person will have fasting glucose consistently in the low 80s or even high 70s. If your fasting glucose is consistently in the high 90s or above, even though that's still technically normal, it suggests insulin resistance. And if your numbers are bouncing all over the place, going from 82 one day to 98 the next, that variability itself indicates poor metabolic control. Test number 3 is the post-meal glucose test. This one is incredibly powerful because it shows you how your body actually responds to food in real time. Again, using your home glucose meter, measure your blood sugar right before you eat a meal, then exactly 1 hour after you finish eating, and then 2 hours after you finish eating. In someone with good insulin sensitivity, blood sugar typically peaks at around 1 hour after eating, and should not go above 140. By 2 hours after eating, blood sugar should be back down close to baseline, ideally under 120. If your blood sugar goes above 140 at the 1-hour mark, or if it's still elevated above 120 at the 2-hour mark, that indicates your body is not efficiently clearing glucose from your bloodstream. This could mean insulin resistance, or in more advanced cases, it could mean your pancreas isn't producing enough insulin. Either way, it's a sign that your glucose metabolism is impaired. The great thing about this test is you can do it with different types of meals to see how your body responds to different foods. You might find that a meal heavy in refined carbs sends your blood sugar skyrocketing, while a meal with protein, fat, and fiber keeps it stable. Test number 4 is the triglyceride-to-HDL ratio. Now, this one does require a blood test, but it's usually part of a standard lipid panel that you might already have from a recent doctor's visit. If you have those results, pull them out and look at your triglycerides and your HDL cholesterol. Divide your triglycerides by your HDL. In a metabolically healthy person with good insulin sensitivity, this ratio should be less than 2, and ideally less than 1. If your ratio is above 3, that's a strong indicator of insulin resistance. Why does this ratio matter? Because when you're insulin resistant, your liver starts overproducing triglycerides and your HDL, which is your good cholesterol, tends to be low. This pattern is so strongly associated with insulin resistance that some researchers consider it a better predictor than fasting glucose. And here's the thing your doctor might not tell you. You can have totally normal total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol and still have a terrible triglyceride to HDL ratio. This is why it's so important to look at the individual components of your lipid panel, not just the overall numbers. Test number 5 is the skin fold thickness test. This is another simple physical measurement that can indicate insulin resistance. Using your thumb and forefinger, pinch the skin on the back of your upper arm, about halfway between your shoulder and elbow. You should be able to pinch up a fold of skin and the fat underneath it. If that fold is more than an inch thick, it suggests excess body fat, which is associated with insulin resistance. You can also do this on your abdomen, just to the side of your belly button. If the fold there is more than an inch and a half thick, again, that indicates excess body fat. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, I know I'm overweight. I don't need to pinch my skin to tell me that. But here's why this matters. The distribution of your body fat matters more than the total amount. You can be relatively thin and still be insulin resistant if you're carrying fat in the wrong places. And you can be somewhat overweight, but metabolically healthy if your body composition is good and your fat is more subcutaneous, meaning under the skin, rather than visceral, meaning around your organs. These tests help you understand not just whether you have excess fat, but where that fat is and what it means for your metabolic health. Test number 6 is the blood pressure test. High blood pressure is both a symptom and a consequence of insulin resistance. If you have a home blood pressure monitor, check your blood pressure first thing in the morning, before you eat, and before you're active for the day. Do this for several days and track the results. Normal blood pressure is considered less than 120/80. If your systolic pressure, that's the top number, is consistently above 130, or your diastolic pressure, the bottom number, is consistently above 85, that's considered elevated, and it's associated with insulin resistance. Now, blood pressure can be elevated for many reasons, not just insulin resistance. But if you have elevated blood pressure, along with several of the other signs we've talked about, like abdominal obesity, elevated fasting glucose, or a poor triglyceride to HDL ratio, then insulin resistance is very likely the underlying issue. And here's the good news. When you improve insulin sensitivity, blood pressure often improves as well, sometimes dramatically, even without medication. Test number 7 is the hunger and energy tracking test. This one doesn't involve any measurements or devices. It's purely subjective, but it's incredibly valuable. For 1 week, keep a simple journal tracking your hunger levels and energy levels throughout the day. Rate your hunger on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not hungry at all and 10 being ravenously hungry. Do the same for energy, with 1 being completely exhausted and 10 being fully energized and alert. Pay particular attention to how you feel in the morning before breakfast, how you feel 2 to 3 hours after each meal, and how you feel in the late afternoon. Someone with good insulin sensitivity typically wakes up with decent energy, doesn't experience extreme hunger between meals, and has relatively stable energy throughout the day. Someone with insulin resistance often wakes up feeling sluggish, experiences intense hunger and cravings every few hours, and has significant energy crashes, especially after meals. If your journal shows a pattern of energy and hunger roller coasters, that's a strong sign of poor blood sugar control and insulin resistance. Now let's talk about continuous glucose monitors, or CGMs. These have become more accessible recently, and they're an absolute game changer for understanding your metabolic health. A CGM is a small device that you wear on your arm or abdomen, and it measures your blood sugar continuously, 24 hours a day for up to 2 weeks. You can see in real time how your blood sugar responds to every meal, every snack, every workout, even how it changes during sleep. The data you get from a CGM is incredibly detailed and personalized. You might discover that oatmeal, which is supposed to be healthy, sends your blood sugar through the roof. Or you might find that eating protein and fat before carbs in a meal significantly blunts your glucose spike. You can see how stress affects your blood sugar, how sleep affects it, how different types of exercise affect it. It's like having a window into your metabolism. Now, CGMs used to require a prescription and were mainly used by people with diabetes. But now, there are companies that offer CGMs for general wellness and metabolic health tracking. They're not cheap, typically a couple $100s for a 2-week sensor. But if you're serious about understanding your insulin sensitivity and optimizing your metabolic health, it's an investment that can pay massive dividends. The insights you get from 2 weeks of CGM data can fundamentally change how you eat and live. So now you've done these tests, you've measured your waist, you've tracked your fasting glucose, you've tested your post-meal blood sugar, you've calculated your triglyceride-to-HDL ratio, you've assessed your hunger and energy patterns, and let's say the results indicate that you do have insulin resistance. What do you do about it? This is where the rubber meets the road. Understanding that you have a problem is step 1, but fixing the problem requires action. Here's the step-by-step action plan to improve your insulin sensitivity. And I want to be clear, this is not a quick fix. Insulin resistance develops over years, and reversing it takes time and consistency. But the good news is that your body wants to be insulin sensitive. You're not fighting against your biology. You're working with it. Every positive change you make starts to reverse the problem immediately. Step 1. Reduce your consumption of refined carbohydrates and added sugars. This is non-negotiable. If you want to improve insulin sensitivity, you have to stop constantly spiking your blood sugar and insulin. That means cutting out or drastically reducing things like soda, juice, candy, pastries, white bread, white rice, pasta, and most processed foods. These foods cause rapid, dramatic spikes in blood sugar, which forces your pancreas to dump out massive amounts of insulin, which over time makes your cells more resistant to insulin. I know this sounds extreme to some people, but here's the thing. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to never eat a cookie or a slice of pizza again. But those things need to become occasional treats, not daily staples. The foundation of your diet should be whole, unprocessed foods that don't cause dramatic blood sugar spikes. Think vegetables, quality proteins, healthy fats, some fruit, and if you tolerate them well, moderate amounts of whole grains and legumes. Step 2. Increase your protein intake, especially at breakfast. Protein does not spike insulin the way carbohydrates do, and it helps keep you full and satisfied, which reduces cravings. A breakfast high in protein and healthy fat, like eggs with avocado or Greek yogurt with nuts, will give you stable energy and stable blood sugar all morning. Compare that to a breakfast of cereal or toast or a muffin, which will spike your blood sugar, crash it a few hours later, and leave you starving and craving more carbs by mid-morning. Aim for at least 25 to 30 grams of protein at breakfast. And if you're someone who's never hungry in the morning, that itself might be a sign of insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction. As your insulin sensitivity improves, your natural hunger signals often become more normalized, and you might find yourself actually wanting breakfast. Step 3. Incorporate strength training into your routine at least 2 to 3 times per week. Muscle is the primary site where glucose is stored and used in your body. When you build muscle through resistance training, you increase your body's capacity to handle glucose. You create more storage space, and muscle tissue is insulin sensitive. The more muscle you have, the more glucose your body can clear from your bloodstream without needing massive amounts of insulin. This doesn't mean you have to become a bodybuilder or spend 2 hours a day in the gym. It means doing some form of resistance training. Whether that's lifting weights, using resistance bands, doing body weight exercises like push-ups and squats, or even doing heavy yard work or carrying groceries. The key is to challenge your muscles, creating small amounts of damage that your body then repairs and strengthens. That adaptation process improves insulin sensitivity. Step 4. Add walking after meals, especially after dinner. This is one of the simplest and most effective things you can do to improve blood sugar control. When you eat a meal, your blood sugar rises. If you sit on the couch and watch TV after eating, that glucose just sits in your bloodstream, and your pancreas has to work hard to produce insulin to bring it down. But if you take a 10 to 15 minute walk after eating, your muscles start using that glucose for energy. Your blood sugar doesn't spike as high, your insulin doesn't have to spike as high, and over time, this pattern improves your insulin sensitivity. Studies have shown that even a short walk after meals can reduce post-meal blood sugar spikes by 20 to 30%. That's significant, and it's something almost everyone can do. You don't need a gym membership or special equipment. Just walk around your neighborhood, walk around your office building, walk around your house if you have to. The movement matters more than the intensity. Step 5. Prioritize sleep and manage stress. This is where a lot of people drop the ball because they think diet and exercise are the only things that matter. But poor sleep and chronic stress both massively impair insulin sensitivity. When you don't sleep enough, your body produces more cortisol, which is a stress hormone that raises blood sugar and promotes insulin resistance. Sleep deprivation also increases hunger hormones and decreases satiety hormones, making you more likely to overeat and crave junk food. Similarly, chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated all the time, which keeps blood sugar elevated and makes insulin resistance worse. You have to address this. That might mean setting a consistent bedtime and actually sticking to it. It might mean learning stress management techniques like meditation, deep breathing, or yoga. It might mean setting boundaries at work or in your personal life, so you're not constantly overwhelmed. Whatever it takes, sleep and stress management have to be part of the plan. Consider time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting. We talked about this extensively in the fasting video, but it bears repeating here. When you compress your eating into a shorter window each day, you give your insulin levels time to drop to baseline. You give your body a break from constant digestion and constant insulin production. This has been shown in numerous studies to improve insulin sensitivity, reduce fasting insulin levels, and help with weight loss, particularly abdominal fat loss. You don't have to do anything extreme. Even just limiting your eating to a 10 or 12-hour window, say 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., can make a difference. And if you're comfortable with it, narrowing that window to 8 hours, the classic 16-8 intermittent fasting pattern, can be even more effective. The key is consistency. Doing it once in a while won't help much, but doing it most days, making it part of your routine, creates real metabolic change. Step 7. Track your progress and adjust as needed. This is where those at-home tests we talked about earlier come back in. After you've been implementing these changes for 4 to 6 weeks, retest yourself. Measure your waist again. Check your fasting glucose. Do the post-meal glucose test. See if your hunger and energy patterns have changed. This feedback is critical because it tells you whether what you're doing is working. If you're seeing improvement, fantastic. Keep going. If you're not seeing much change, you need to dig deeper. Maybe your carb intake is still too high. Maybe you're not sleeping enough. Maybe stress is sabotaging your efforts. Maybe you have an underlying medical issue that needs to be addressed. The point is, you're using objective data to guide your decisions instead of just guessing or hoping things are getting better. Now I know some of you are thinking, this sounds like a lot of work. Can't I just take a supplement or a medication to fix insulin resistance? And the answer is, there are supplements and medications that can help, but they're not magic bullets. Metformin, for example, is a medication commonly prescribed for insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, and it can be helpful. Supplements like berberine, chromium, alpha-lipoic acid, and magnesium have some evidence supporting their use for blood sugar control. But here's the thing, none of these things will overcome a terrible diet, a sedentary lifestyle, chronic sleep deprivation, and unmanaged stress. They can support the process of improving insulin sensitivity, but they can't replace the fundamental lifestyle changes. Think of them as tools in your toolbox, not as the entire solution. And if you're going to use supplements or medications, work with a healthcare provider who can monitor your progress and adjust as needed. Let's also talk about what happens when you improve your insulin sensitivity. What can you actually expect? First and most noticeably, you'll lose weight, especially around your midsection. As insulin levels come down, your body shifts out of fat storage mode and into fat burning mode. That stubborn belly fat that seemed impossible to lose starts to melt away. And this isn't just about aesthetics. Losing visceral fat dramatically reduces your risk of heart disease, diabetes, fatty liver disease, and numerous other conditions. Second, your energy levels stabilize. You stop experiencing those mid-afternoon crashes. You wake up feeling more refreshed. You don't need constant snacks to keep your energy up. This happens because your blood sugar becomes more stable throughout the day. You're not on that blood sugar roller coaster anymore. Your cells are efficiently using the energy you give them, so you actually feel energized instead of constantly drained. Third, your cravings decrease or even disappear. When you're insulin resistant and your blood sugar is constantly spiking and crashing, your body is constantly screaming for more sugar, more carbs, more quick energy. But when your insulin sensitivity improves and your blood sugar stabilizes, those cravings quiet down. You can walk past the donut shop without even thinking about it. You can have sweets in the house and not feel compelled to eat them. Food stops controlling you. Fourth, your mental clarity improves. That brain fog lifts. You can focus better, think more clearly, remember things more easily. Your brain is getting a steady supply of energy instead of the feast or famine cycle it was dealing with before. Many people describe this as feeling like a veil has been lifted. They didn't even realize how foggy they'd been until the fog cleared. Fifth, your blood pressure and cholesterol often improve. As insulin sensitivity increases, blood pressure tends to come down. That triglyceride-to-HDL ratio we talked about earlier improves. Inflammation markers decrease. Your entire cardiovascular risk profile gets better. And this can happen even before you've lost a significant amount of weight. The metabolic improvements start immediately when you start treating your body right. Sixth, if you're a woman dealing with PCOS or hormonal imbalances, those often improve as well. Regular menstrual cycles return. Acne clears up. Excess hair growth slows down. Fertility improves. This is because insulin resistance is a major driver of hormonal dysfunction in women. And when you fix the insulin resistance, the hormones often rebalance themselves. I want to acknowledge that this process is not always linear. You're going to have good days and bad days. You're going to have weeks where you see great progress, and weeks where nothing seems to be changing. You might even have periods where things seem to get worse before they get better. That's normal. Your body is adjusting. Metabolic healing takes time. The insulin resistance didn't develop overnight, and it's not going to disappear overnight. But here's what I can promise you. If you consistently implement these changes, if you make them part of your lifestyle rather than a temporary diet, your insulin sensitivity will improve, your metabolic health will improve, and you'll feel better than you have in years, maybe better than you've ever felt. You'll have more energy, better mood, clearer thinking, and you'll be dramatically reducing your risk of some of the most serious chronic diseases we face today. And here's the beautiful thing. Unlike a lot of health conditions that require lifelong medication management, insulin resistance is largely reversible through lifestyle changes. You have control over this. You don't have to resign yourself to a lifetime of declining health. You can take action right now, today, and start turning things around. If you want to understand more about how fasting fits into all of this, and how giving your body strategic breaks from eating can dramatically improve insulin sensitivity, go watch my video on the stages of fasting. That video breaks down exactly what happens in your body hour by hour during a fast, and it's the perfect complement to what we've talked about today. Understanding both sides, how to eat and when not to eat, gives you complete control over your metabolic health. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.